Good afternoon. I'll call to order this regularly scheduled meeting of the Community Development Committee of the Metropolitan Council for March 17th, 2005. Happy St. Patty's Day. I see several committee members and our recording secretary are dressed for the holiday. And we also have our new committee membership starting now. So we have Councilmember Morales, who will not be able to join us. He has a conflict, and of course, Councilmember Cameron. So we'll welcome them when they are here. Committee members, to start out, we have the first item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. If there's no corrections, objections, we'll consider it approved. We have an agenda. Second item is approval of the minutes of February 3rd, 2025 of the Community Development Committee. Is there a motion to approve, please?
Move approval.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Carter. Second. Any discussion, additions, corrections? Hearing none, all in approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. Move on to the consent agenda. 3 items. I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second? Thank you, Councilmember. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The consent agenda is approved. We'll move on to non-consent items. The first is 2025-69. It's the Midtown Greenway Regional Trail Long Range Plan. And I will welcome Colin Kelly and Zoey Mauck. Is that how you say it?
Yes.
Great. Zoey Mauck, welcome to the committee.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and council members. I'm Colin Kelly, planning analyst, and I'm joined by Zoey Mauck, trails planner, and we're here to present the Midtown Greenway Regional Trail Long Range Plan on behalf of Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board, also known as MPRB. I should note that Adam Arvidsson, MPRB Director of Strategic Planning, is also here and could respond to questions after our presentation if needed. The Midtown Greenway is located centrally in the Regional Parks and Trails System in Hennepin County and the city of Minneapolis. The figures shown here are figures 1 through 3 in the staff report. Trail boundaries are generally established, though the long-range plan recognizes that expansion over the Mississippi River is a possibility as part of the bicycle and pedestrian trail expansion project that is being led by the Metropolitan Council. Future ownership of any trail extension is to be determined. Most of the existing Midtown Greenway is on land that is owned by the Hennepin County Regional Rail Authority, or HCRA, who is one of the 2 primary operators of the trail, along with the city of Minneapolis. The trail boundary includes park areas that are immediately adjacent to the trail, including the mall, Sioux Line Garden, and the CPRO site. 2 parcels were identified as future acquisition sites. The first is a 0.55 acre area located on the north side of the Greenway, adjacent to West River Parkway and East 26th Street, owned by the city of Minneapolis. The second is a 5.02 acre parcel on the east side of Hiawatha Avenue next to the Sabo Bridge, currently owned by the Met Council. Formal appraisals have not yet been completed for either area at this time, and there is currently no timeline for acquisition. Dating back to 1999, the public has been engaged on planning for the Midtown Greenway through a variety of planning efforts and initiatives. The long-range plan before you seeks to honor and elevate those voices, as well as to reflect engagement conducted specifically for this planning process. 3 agencies will play critical roles in the future of the Greenway, including the city of Minneapolis, HCRA, and MPRB. To clearly identify roles and responsibilities between these agencies, a cooperative agreement focused on ownership, operations, and use of regional funding was developed and includes provisions to update the agreement regularly. MPRB also organized and implemented a project advisory committee, a technical advisory committee, and an operations work group, each of whom informed the development of the long-range plan. In addition, MPRB examined the demographics of the trail service area, engaged with local residents, and made changes to the plan based on the engagement they conducted. Demographically speaking, Areas along the Greenway are more diverse than Minneapolis as a whole, with larger percentages of people of color, non-English speakers, people that live below the poverty line, and people that do not own a car, with the central part of the corridor showing the most diversity. Major themes of the engagement included a desire for safety improvements and more trailside amenities. As a result of engagement, additional amenity zones were added. Additional funding was added to the cost estimate for each amenity zone, and the plan's guiding principles were expanded to support design and implementation. Before the plan was submitted to the council, it was adopted by MPRB Board of Commissioners on December 4th, 2024, with support from the Midtown Greenway Coalition. The board resolution and the Midtown Greenway Coalition's letter of support are attachments 1 and 2 in the staff report. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Zoey.
Thanks, Colin.
Ms. Mauck, welcome to the committee.
Thank you so much. So moving on to the development concept, this plan involves the development of 11 amenity zones shown here, or figure 3 in the business item. Starting from the west end of the corridor, amenity zones are included at Westlake, the Mall, Sioux Line Garden, Nicollet and First Avenue South, Fifth Avenue South, the Cipro site, Bloomington Avenue, East 28th Street, Hiawatha Avenue, Brackett Field, and West River Parkway. To highlight a few of these amenity zones, as Colin mentioned, the Mall, Sioux Line Garden, and Cipro site are all MPRB-owned park spaces that connect to the Greenway and will continue to improve access to the trail and provide a linear park-like feel along the corridor. The Nicollet and First site, known to some as the Kmart project or New Nicollet site will reconnect Nicollet Avenue as a through street where there was a former Kmart building. The city has developed plans for a mixed-use area, including housing, retail, and a new park space, and additional access to the Greenway will be included here. Moving east, land acquisitions east of the Sabo Bridge and north of the West River Parkway trail entrance will add amenities adjacent to the trail while also improving access to the trail, especially for those traveling from the north of that West River Parkway trail access point. And again, while the trail currently ends at West River Parkway, it's important to note that the Midtown Greenway Trail Expansion Planning Project will eventually extend the Greenway across the Mississippi and into St. Paul. The total estimated development and improvement cost associated with the Midtown Greenway Regional Trail Long Range Plan is $2,469,100 with an average of $120,100 per amenity zone. Along the corridor, acquisition of 2 parcels is proposed, though no formal appraisals have been completed at this time. And finally, any operations of the amenity zones I just described on land not owned by MPRB will be the responsibility of other agencies as outlined in the cooperative agreement. The rationale for proposed action is the Midtown Greenway Regional Trail Long Range Plan is consistent with the requirements of the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan, specifically Chapter 5, Strategy 1, and other council policies as included in Thrive MSP 2040. I also wanted to note that we use the 2040 plan for review since this plan was submitted ahead of adoption of Imagine 2050. So the proposed action before you is that the Metropolitan Council approve Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board's Midtown Greenway Regional Trail Long Range Plan and require MPRB, prior to initiating any construction, to send preliminary plans to the Metropolitan Council Environmental Services Interceptor Engineering Assistant Manager. Quite a mouthful there. It's important to note that the Metropolitan Parks and Open Space Commission, or MPOSC, voted unanimously on March 6th to approve this plan. And with that, we will stand for your questions and remind you that staff members from MPRB are here as well.
Great, thanks, Ms. Mauck. Mr. Kelly, for your report and for your work on this. Also, I want to welcome Councilmember Cameron to the committee. Yeah, thanks for being here and welcome. You're gonna have a lot of fun here. A lot of fun. Cool. Questions or comments on that report? Questions, Councilmember Lindstrom.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm curious about St. Paul, this has been a topic of an interest for those on the east side of the river for probably decades. Any chance of seeing any movement on that at any time in the near future? Will we still be talking about this on St. Patrick's Day, 2035, 45, 55? Last I heard, the railroad is like, ain't gonna happen. So
Yeah, I will
don't know.
say Colin and I are both part of a project working on the expansion, and that is not part of this project, so it's a totally separate thing. But there are plans working toward it, but it is a challenge with the railroad, of course. So no concrete plans at this time, but there will be some more futuristic thinking going soon.
Thanks, Councilmember. And Councilmember Lynch is talking about the river crossing, right? And
Correct, yeah.
long been an interest.
Futuristic thinking, sir.
What'd you say,
Yes.
Councilmember Carter?
Oh, no, I just was repeating, more futuristic thinking
Yeah.
soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's a real clue.
Other questions? Comments? Hearing none, I just want to note that long before I was even in elected life, or before I was a board member of the Midtown Greenway Coalition before construction of even the Phase 1 section. I lived right on the Phase 1 section at 3rd Avenue in the Greenway for 36 years, and it was just such a welcome amenity in an amenity-starved area. And as a bike commuter, I use it frequently. Now I live a little further off, so I don't use it as much, but I used to. And I really also want to acknowledge Hennepin County's role in the creation and establishment of the Midtown Greenway. And the county really stepped up, was willing to purchase the rail corridor. You know, we talked about the CPRO site, and I'm sure there are others, but the CPRO site was grain elevators, right? And they were still actually in use before the Midtown Greenway was implemented, and the county stepped up and purchased that site as well, and for a future park, and there's some amenities there now, but it looks like there's more planned. And then the one question I have, and I'm guessing I know the answer, and if I looked a little closer, but I'm guessing with the Nicollet Avenue redevelopment and the reopening of Nicollet at Lake Street, that the little segment of the Greenway that is super narrow will actually be widened a bit to accommodate the bike lanes. And for those of you who haven't been there, these lanes go down to, would you guys know the right of way? Right. It feels like it's about 6 feet, right? Maybe a few feet per bike lane, and then the pedestrian lane. It's, and so do you, what are the plans for that super narrow segment? Do we know?
Mr. Chair, we're not certain about
Okay. All right.
potential extension or widening of that
Right.
segment here
Okay.
in that space. We
Yep.
could certainly find out or see if there's
Okay.
anyone else who might
Well,
be
we
able
can-
to
yeah.
respond to that question.
Oh,
Looks like
here
there
we
might be
go.
somebody, yeah. Phone and a friend.
Hello.
Hello, Chair Lilligren, committee members. My name is Adam Arvidsson, and I'm the Director of Strategic Planning at the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board. The redevelopment of the Lake Street Kmart, which the city of Minneapolis refers to as the New Nicollet Project, is not a project that's being led by the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board, though we are involved because there's a potential to have some park space on that property. The park space planned there would be non-contiguous with the Greenway Trail itself because it's on the south side of the Greenway. And actually that property, that Kmart property, does not include any portion of the HICRA or Hennepin County Regional Rail Authority owned land. So I don't expect that as part of the new Nicollet project, there will be an alteration of that narrow trail segment. However, the ramp in this location will be reconstructed and relocated, hopefully providing better access from the surface streets down to the Greenway. The design of that is still being worked out exactly. But that's the only piece that I know of that could affect the Greenway itself as part of that new Nicollet project.
Great. Thanks, Mr. Arvidsson, for being here and for the response. Great. Any other questions, comments? Councilmember Lee?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. The two parcels that have been proposed for acquisition don't have formal appraisals yet. When they do, is that cost going to come back to us?
Mr. Kelly?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Lee. It's a good question. I'm not aware of the process to seek out those appraisals going forward. I know there's been some discussion, particularly of the Met Council-owned property on the east side of the Sabo Bridge. I think there could be some negotiation worked out with the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board, but I do not have the details of such discussions at hand.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. I had the same question, so thanks for asking that. Yeah, Director Barajas, did you?
I can
Or
defer to.
Mr.
Probably
Ibbotson,
know the details.
please.
Chair Lilligren, Councilmember Lee, appraisals when we're talking about a government-to-government transaction aren't actually always asked for, because sometimes that takes place as a land swap or sometimes simply a free transfer if it's in the best interests of both governments. Mr. Kelly spoke a little bit about the Met Council-owned parcel, but the other parcel that's slated for acquisition and incorporation into this trail boundary is owned by the city of Minneapolis. And there's certainly instances where we have collaborated with the city of Minneapolis to realign public land ownership in the way that's in the best interests of the public without necessarily having a fee transaction. So it's not guaranteed that those costs would ever come back to any of the funding streams that the Met Council has authority over. Sometimes that happens just between the two local governments. I think our intent in including them here is that if we ever do acquire those properties, we would want them to be within the regional park boundary so that the park board's maintenance of those properties do fall in line with the funding requirements for the sources that the Met Council governs.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks. And Director Barajas?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I would just add that any transfer of the council-owned land would be in front of you as an action at some point once we come to whatever agreement that is for whatever parcel that would be. That wouldn't just happen at a staff level.
Great, thanks. Cool. Further discussion, questions? Otherwise, staff has presented a proposed action to approve the Park and Recreation Board's Midtown Greenway Regional Trail Long Range Plan and a requirement that prior to initiating construction, send preliminary plans to the Metropolitan Council Environmental Services Interceptor Engineering Assistant Manager. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
Thanks. A motion, Councilmember Carter, second by Lindstrom. Discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Hearing none, all in approval, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That carries. Good work. Thank you. And Mr. Robinson, thanks for being here. Thanks for being here. Thank you. We'll move on to our other non-consent business item. It's a joint committees item, 2025-50. It's first quarter carry forward budget amendment, and Ms. Giesel's here to present. Welcome.
Hi, Mr. Chair, committee members. I'm Heather Giesel, Director of Finance and Administration for Community Development. Budget amendments are a routine part of our annual budget process, and we come to you approximately quarterly as we need to adjust our operating and capital budgets. So first off, Community Development is requesting to carry forward $505,000 of expenses and funding into our 2025 operating budget. These are funds that will be used to complete projects that have been initiated but were not fully completed back in 2024. The projects include the Climate Action Plan implementation, wrapping up the Imagine 2050 development, fair housing, and the Regional Development Guide Art and Policy Community Engagement. In addition to the carry forward items, we are requesting to amend Community Development's capital program as well. First, in the administrative adjustments section, so there are project details for these adjustments found in the attachment 3 of the business item. They represent projects where the funding has already been approved and is now being programmed to specific projects. So just as a quick reminder, there's no formal action for you to take on these adjustments tonight. We have included them for transparency and for accounting purposes only. The acquisition projects contained within the business item have been approved by the council through separate official actions at the recommendation of MPOSC, and specific actions have been cited on page 2 of the business item. The other projects that you see in this section have been reviewed for conformity with the Regional Parks Policy Plan as well. Finally, in the operating budget, you'll see the carry forward projects mentioned earlier. And the amendment also transfers $300,000 of family affordable housing operating fund reserves to the HRA capital program. These funds will be used to complete large home improvements needed to maintain council-owned properties. These are things such as complete window replacements at homes or replacements of roofs. This amendment supports the Thrive outcome of stewardship by assessing future needs, responsible planning, and management of financial resources for the Community Development Capital Program. This amendment will help advance stewardship and prosperity through monitoring development and growth patterns in the region. It will also advance sustainability by preserving affordable rents in the housing market and supporting climate change, greenhouse gas mitigation planning. So the proposed action before you is that you authorize the 2025 unified budget as indicated in accordance with the attached tables. I can stand for any questions at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Giesel. Questions on this report or this budget amendment? No questions. Hearing none, the proposed action is that the Metropolitan Council authorize the 2025 unified budget amendment as indicated in accordance with the attached tables. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve?
Second. Thank you, Council Members Chambliss and Wolf. Discussion on the motion? Any discussion? Hearing none, all in approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
being here, Ms. Giesel. Thanks for your presentation. And with that, we have dispensed with our business items, and we'll move on to our two information items. The first is homeownership and wealth building opportunities for the Metro HRA. And we have Caitlin Magistad. Is that how you pronounce it?
It's Magistad.
Magistad. Thank you. And Elizabeth Kirsner, welcome.
Thank you. Hello, Chair
Hello.
Lilligren, council members. My name is Elizabeth Kirsner, and I'm the Homeownership and Wealth Building Intern for the Metropolitan Council's Housing and Redevelopment Authority. And this is Caitlin Magistad. She is an outreach coordinator for the HRA. And we are here today to provide you with information about wealth building and homeownership resources and opportunities for the Housing and Redevelopment Authority. And this has been the subject of my internship here at the council since June of 2024. We're going to begin by giving you an overview of the resident engagement that we've done regarding wealth building and homeownership, and then we're going to provide an introduction to two programs that the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, offers to public housing authorities. The first is the Family Self-Sufficiency Program, and the second is the Housing Choice Voucher Homeownership Program. We'll also give updates of the action we've taken since this initial research period and how we've accommodated providing resources to voucher holders while we continue to dive into these two programs. We'd like to begin by more formally introducing ourselves. Again, my name is Elizabeth Kirsner, and I'm the Homeownership and Wealth Building Intern for the HRA. I've been here since June of 2024, and I will end my internship in May of this year. This is my second internship at the Metropolitan Council. I was in Metro Transit as an engineering and facilities intern in the summer of 2023. And currently I'm finishing my Master's of Urban and Regional Planning at the Humphrey School for Public Affairs at the University of Minnesota. And I will be graduating in May. I'm studying housing, thank you. I'm studying housing, community development, and community engagement. And I'll pass it to Caitlin.
Hi, Chair, Council members. My name is Caitlin Magistad, and I'm an outreach coordinator here at Metro HRA. I'm a social worker with experience across a variety of housing programs here in the Twin Cities, including the Wilder Foundation, Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity, and the Metropolitan Consortium of Community Developers. We're excited to share the summary of what we've learned together over the course of Elizabeth's internship, and I'm very proud of Elizabeth, and everyone at the HRA thanks her so much for all of the work that she's done. Really actionable items have come out of our work together, and we really thank her for helping set a strong foundation upon which we will keep advancing our work.
Thank you for your work, Ms. Kirsner.
Thank you.
So this slide is just a reminder of the HRA's goals, some overarching priorities. And so we see the wealth building and homeownership work as being particularly connected to goals 5 and 6. So encouraging movement to areas in the region with low poverty and high performing schools, and promoting sufficiency and stabilizing families. Some questions that helped guide the creation of this internship and working with Elizabeth were, how can we as the Housing and Redevelopment Authority support financial empowerment and wealth building? What capacity do we have as within the agency, and what community partners might we need? And how does the HUD self-sufficiency program and the Housing Choice Voucher homeownership programs intersect with the HRA's mission and goals? As Elizabeth mentioned, she started in June, and so we worked together full-time over the summer, and then she's been with us part-time during the school year while she's also going to school and taking care of a lot of business, so we really do thank her for all her work. And I'll note here that while our thoughts around this question have been impacted by recent federal uncertainty, that doesn't undermine our commitment to this work, our enthusiasm for it, and our excitement to help our participants build pathways to financial empowerment and wealth building.
Thank you, Caitlin. My internship started by updating the HRA's homeownership resource guide, which is something that is a compilation of resources within the Twin Cities region that HRA coordinators are able to give to voucher holders who express interest or inquire about homeownership, which is something we do hear from voucher holders. From there, I helped out with our resident advisory boards, which is our community engagement events. These are held throughout the region and ask for feedback on topics including homeownership and wealth building. And Caitlin will talk a little bit more about what we found from that in the next slide. Throughout the summer and into the fall, I worked extensively on a literature review of the homeownership and wealth building landscape within the Twin Cities region and throughout the country. And I identified 2 programs, the Family Self-Sufficiency Program and the Housing Choice Voucher Homeownership Program, that were the most widely implemented programs by public housing authorities. Since identifying these 2 programs, Caitlin and I have attended a training on the Family Self-Sufficiency Program put on by NARO, the National Association of Housing Redevelopment Officials, to think about what implementation of these programs would look like and to assess what a program coordinator should or would be able to need to do in this role. I've also conducted a variety of informational interviews since the start of my internship with mostly public housing authorities within the region who house one of these programs. So in the region, I talked to Washington County's Community Development Authority, I talked to St. Paul Public Housing Authority, and I talked to St. Louis Parks Public Housing Authority, who all house the Family Self-Sufficiency Program. And then outside of the region, I talked to Boston Public Housing Authority, which has a pretty robust housing choice voucher homeownership program. And finally, I've been vetting online financial and homeownership courses that would be required of voucher holders who would participate in one of these programs.
And then she also worked on some communications projects, which include, came out of this first event that is mentioned here on the slide. So one of the primary things I do here at the HRA is coordinate our resident engagement. Love talking with groups of people about housing. And so in October of 2022, we had a resident event that was specifically focused on homeownership, mentioned here on the left of the slide. But even before thinking about any of these events, as Elizabeth mentioned, anecdotally in our day-to-day customer service interactions with our voucher holders, our coordinators and our inspectors often hear about a desire to build wealth and are interested in homeownership. They don't really know necessarily about these pathways that exist through administrative plans, right? They're just interested in saving and building for the future. And so our inspectors and coordinators often receive, just in a customer service interaction about a rent portion, might also have a question about homeownership. So in October of 2022, we had a resident engagement event focused on affordable homeownership. It was by Zoom, and we had a virtual panel that I helped facilitate. The topic and the outreach actually preceded me. It was one of my first acts of service here to facilitate this conversation. We had a participant who was previously on Metro HRA's Housing Choice Voucher Program who had increased her family's income and was able to buy a home and working off the program. So she didn't use either of these mechanisms that we're talking about today, just a natural path that some folks might take in terms of increasing their income to the point that they're not on the voucher anymore. So she shared her household's experience, and then we also had some folks from nonprofits here in the Twin Cities, as Elizabeth mentioned, a pretty robust ecosystem of nonprofits doing wealth building programs, and so we had someone from the Family Housing Fund talk about some of their initiatives, and we also had the Director of Programs for NeighborWorks Home Partners, and they do a fair amount of homeownership counseling. They have some down payment assistance, and they are of particular interest, I believe, because they operate in our service area. So NeighborWorks Home Partners is contracted with, say, like the city of Shoreview, I think maybe some of suburban Hennepin County as well, to offer some down payment assistance for those areas. So they felt like a good fit for this panel. And then, pardon me, coming out of that, as a follow-up to the residents who attended that panel, we put together like a really simple, just like, don't wait for us to figure out the program elements that we are thinking about. There's a lot of resources that you could tap into now. And so it was like a really just like a sad Word document I put together. So Elizabeth has made it much more user-friendly and visually appealing. And so there was a flyer on the last page of the info item that has a QR code that links to our website and has some other resources, just for folks to know that there are options while housing authorities are exploring different programs. And then we also had some great feedback in that session just around ideas for outreach, talking to folks across the income bands that we serve. Often by the time people are thinking about homeownership, their income is such that they might be close to being off of the voucher. And so how are we working with folks the whole time that they're with us, knowing that we're a large agency that can't necessarily provide individual support to all of our households. And so finding that balance as a rental assistance provider. And then in June of 2024, right after Elizabeth's internship started, we had a series of resident engagement events throughout a couple physical locations in suburbs of our service area, as well as a couple Zoom events. And we had a couple different topics during those engagements, and homeownership and wealth building was one of the topics. And participants expressed a lot of interest in saving money, increasing their incomes, and building wealth. Folks noted they'd like to see options for homeownership and saving, like programs that the HRA could offer, but also acknowledge that not everyone is looking to buy a home, that other folks are maybe interested in that's why we are talking about financial empowerment and wealth building. And folks also mentioned interest in workshops around budgeting, building and repairing credit, entrepreneurship, and planning and saving for major future expenses like personal vehicles, college for themselves or a child, or starting a small business. And then down payment and closing costs are, of course, barriers that our participants tell us are significant barriers for them to homeownership, as well as the mismatch of inventory between what is accessible and affordable to first-time home buyers and the areas, and in particular school districts where they would like to buy. And so that continues to be a challenge that I don't claim the HRA will be able to impact, but it's something we want to be aware of as we're thinking about programming for our voucher holders. And I didn't put this on the slide, but I do want to mention the demographics of the voucher holders that we serve, which you have heard before when you hear HRA business. So we serve about 7,600 households, according to our most recent report. 64% of our households, the head of household identifies as Black or African American. 29% of our households are white. 2 or more races for 4%, and then Asian and American Indian households are each 1%. And so we're serving a very diverse group of folks, but we know that just serving diverse folks through rental assistance doesn't guarantee equity and access. And so we really want to be thoughtful about how we're reaching different participants in our programs and thinking about connecting them to different culturally appropriate resources, things that make sense for them and their community, whether it's a particular type of loan they might be eligible for, or considering non-interest bearing lending products. So this was a robust topic within the resident engagement we did in June, and we know that it's of interest to our participants all the time. So Elizabeth has mentioned the FSS and HCV home ownership programs that she'll go into a little more detail about. This slide is just kind of a representation of the range or the continuum of options that Metro HRA is considering for wealth building for our participants. And that workshops and community partnerships that Metro HRA can offer and create could stand alone and not necessarily be a part of the regulatory frameworks that Elizabeth will mention around those HUD programs. And so the Housing Choice Voucher Program, it's 50 years old. That's exciting. We're proud to be a part of this program. Foundational nationwide rental assistance program. However, the program's long history, elements of local flexibility, and different iterations of special programs over time can really cause confusion among voucher holders and other community partners about what is the pathway to buying homeownership, how do I leave the voucher program, and perhaps having heard of somebody in a different area a long time ago accessed a certain program. And so we're often just combating misinformation about how the program is or was. And so that's just something for us to consider as we continue on this path, is just making sure that we are able to address those concerns and provide a good level of service in whatever path we decide to take for financial wealth building.
So now we're going to transition into information about these two HUD programs, and we'll start with the Family Self-Sufficiency Program, which I may refer to as FSS in this section. The FSS program was established in 1990 as part of the Affordable Housing Act, and it is a 5-year program that helps participants build financial capability and assets through an economic incentive paired with case management and coaching. The economic incentive takes the form of an escrow savings account, which when participants' income increase from participating in the program, an amount goes into this escrow account to raise their savings. HUD has specified that the main goals of the FSS program are to increase educational and employment attainment that leads to increased earnings, to engage in financial empowerment activities that are going to reduce debt, increase credit score, and increase savings, and then finally to decrease or eliminate the need for temporary assistance for needy families, or TANF. And we can go to the next slide. This is a good graphic that shows how FSS increases voucher holder savings over time. So when someone enters FSS, they are going to set goals that are achievable during this 5-year time period by completing an individual training and services plan. And during the completion of the goals, the participant's income may rise. As participants FSS participants are going to pay more rent as their earnings increase, which is typical of our general voucher program. But at the same time, an amount generally equal to that rent increase is going to be deposited into an escrow savings account on their behalf. And this account is funded through the housing assistance payments and operating subsidies through HUD by the Public Housing Authority. And as part of the program, you sign a contract of participation saying that you're going to try your best to work towards these goals. And an integral part of this contract of participation and the program is that this escrow account is paired with case management and coaching to help participants develop the goals and fulfill them. So participants can access the escrow account when they graduate, but there's also a little bit of flexibility. The Public Housing Authority can offer interim disbursements of the cash if it's going to help the participant complete one of their goals. So an example of this would be if your car was broken and you needed to drive to get to your new job or your job, you could get an interim disbursement from your escrow account to be able to repair your car to then drive to your job. Oops, sorry. So there's 2 requirements for graduation from the FSS program. First, all of the household members have to be independent of any cash assistance. This doesn't include Medicaid or food stamps or short-term emergency assistance. And then the second part that you need to be able to accomplish to graduate is that the head of the FSS family has to maintain suitable employment. And this is a flexible term, but it typically means around 30 hours of full-time work per week. The last thing.
Sorry, a question from Councilmember Carter.
And thank you. Just a quick question. You speak of graduating from the program. It's a 5-year program. What happens if
the participant family does not achieve its goals?
Thank you, council member. If the family does not achieve the goals or the head of household, there is some flexibility on the Public Housing Authority's side. They can allow the participant to re-enter the program or decide that the participant does not need to re-enter the program. I think they will be able to get their escrow savings if they do not make the full 5-year period.
And there's also an allowable 2-year extension period on that 5 years. And so if it seems like somebody is not going to be making a 5-year goal, that's part of that case management and coaching is talking about, like, is it appropriate to think about an extension?
If I may,
Yeah,
Mr.
please,
Chair.
Councilmember Carter.
There is no circumstance then underneath which the escrow account is withdrawn and the individual cannot receive that. Is that true?
I'm not sure if I understand the question.
In other
I'm
words,
also going to look to you all.
without completion of goals, is there ever a circumstance underneath which that escrow account is not accessible by that individual?
Ms. Smith?
I'm sorry.
That's all right. I'm just would
Good
rather they
question.
answer.
Chair, council member, thank you for your question. Yes, if an eligible household does not meet the terms of the contract agreement or the contract of participation, the FSS escrow funds can be forfeited. Does that answer your question?
It does.
Okay.
And I appreciate there's some flexibility for elongating the period of time under which they're on the program. Thank you.
Chair, council member. So in the event that you're reaching your 5 years, it would be the FSS coordinator's responsibility to reach out to you to figure out if we should be extending you 2 years and having the forfeiture conversation with you at that point in time to say, you're not meeting your terms, this is the amount that's in your escrow account right now, and we really want you to be successful, how can we get you there?
I understand. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thanks. Further questions or discussions? Councilmember Lee, then Councilmember Lindstrom.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. How exactly does the program help the household decrease or eliminate the need for TANF?
So as the participant engages in these financial education activities, I can go over what some of the goals are. Goals can include like improving your credit score, obtaining your GED or higher, saving for a down payment on home or car. But what you're referring to, I think as a participant's income increases, they have more capability to pay for goods and services that they would need as an individual and as a family member.
Thanks.
Thanks, Councilmember. I have in queue Councilmember Lindstrom and Councilmember Wall. Councilmember Lindstrom.
Yeah, thanks. So just so I understand fully the FSS, someone's income goes up and their rent goes up because of that. That increment, what they were paying before and now what their rent would be, that increment goes into the escrow. That's right so far?
Correct.
So far, so good. And they get all these additional support. So you mentioned that you did a literature review and did some interviews of other programs, and you're probably getting to this, and if you are, I'm sorry for jumping ahead, but I'm just curious, were these other housing authorities happy with the program? I imagine they were. I'm curious to know what sort of challenges they had. Were they like, of course, I can't believe you're not doing this already. It's the greatest thing ever. Or, it's okay. Or steer clear entirely.
Thank you,
Someplace in
Councilmember.
between.
Yeah. The feedback that I received from interviews with public housing authorities was generally positive. I think that both in the FSS program and the homeownership program, which I'll talk about soon, there's a considerable amount of flexibility for the public housing authority. I think some challenges that were encountered that I saw from these public housing authorities were just making sure that there's a department-wide understanding of what this program is and that we can very clearly communicate that to the department, but also the voucher holders that we're serving. I think the Metropolitan Council is a little bit different because we serve such a high volume of voucher holders. We think about, how we would go about recruiting and enrollment for this program if we were to implement it, which is a little bit different than Washington County or St. Louis Park, which has a fewer number of voucher holders.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. Further discussion, Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Where does the funding come from for the case management and coaching?
Thank you, Chair, Council Member. So housing authorities apply under notice of funding availability for the salary portion. Correct, Stephanie?
Chair and council member. Yes, so there are funding opportunities through HUD occasionally. Housing authorities can also elect to add this as a component of our public housing agency plan, our PHA plan. We notify HUD that we're interested in starting the program. So a housing authority can also elect to fund this internally and say we are going to designate a part of our FTE to operate a really small FSS program. So there are certainly flexibilities with that.
And then
Councilmember Wolf.
follow up. So overall, our subsidy per voucher holder has been going up over time as rent costs have been going up faster than people's incomes. Normally, when people's incomes increase where they need less assistance, then that money goes back into the pool for everybody else. What happens if we start running short of money to cover our vouchers? Because we don't know what the funding situation is going to be in the future for those vouchers.
Chair, council member. It's a really fair question. It's a balancing act, quite honestly. And so really what the housing authority will be charged with is making a decision about how we want to kind of take next steps, which will also be guided by our policymakers. So we likely could not operate both programs concurrently, and I think they're getting to this in their presentation. We would need to make a business decision to say we would only start one, and then probably feed. That program would be a feeder into the next program. But again, this may not be the perfect time to make that business decision. There's a little uncertainty in budgeting and things, and so that doesn't mean that we won't continue to explore it. That doesn't mean that all of this hard work is for nothing, because this is certainly still a priority. It's just figuring out the correct timing with which to do it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Paulson. Yep. Further discussion at this point? If not, back to Ms. Magistad and Ms. Kirsner.
Chair, council members, one last point about FSS is that there's been great success with this program, both from what I've heard in these informational interviews, but also on a countrywide level. So there's a study out that's a snapshot of the program from 2007 to 2016, and it shows that the average household income of FSS graduates increased 80%, and that about 37% of graduates of the FSS program left housing assistance within 1 year of their graduation. General escrow amounts during this 2007 to 2016 time period was just over $6,000, and around 15% of their study group went on to homeownership after the FSS program. All right, now we will move on to the other major homeownership and wealth building program that HUD offers, which is the Housing Choice Voucher Homeownership Program. This program allows Housing Choice Voucher participants who are in a financial position to become first-time homebuyers to apply their monthly voucher to a mortgage payment instead of the rental payment. Public housing authorities administer the homeownership voucher program using the same funding pool as rental vouchers, and HUD specifies that households participating in the homeownership program can receive mortgage assistance payment for up to 15 years. And for those who are elderly or disabled, they can provide voucher experience for the length of the mortgage term. Households who are participating in this homeownership program have to be awarded a rental voucher under the same eligibility as our general Housing Choice Voucher program. In addition to qualifying for the general program, those who are selected for this program have to be able to complete homeownership counseling and they have to be able to finance the down payment or closing costs or qualify for some other program that's going to help them with these expenses. Households also have to be able to put at least 3% down on a home purchase. Usually in this program, this amount includes a down payment assistance from nonprofits or other resources that help with this. And finally, for non-elderly and non-disabled participants, one adult member of the family has to maintain full-time employment and has to have maintained that employment consistently for 1 year before receiving this assistance. The homeownership program has a considerable amount of flexibility. For example, the Public Housing Authority can decide how many vouchers it's willing to set aside for this program. A public housing authority could also decide to, instead of offer monthly mortgage payments, they could decide they wanted to offer a down payment assistance grant, which would just be the monthly mortgage payment times 12 given in a lump sum. And like we heard in our engagement sessions, this is not a program for everyone because of the financial requirements that are needed to participate. But for those who are eligible, it's a really great opportunity to increase housing choice and mobility within our region. And I'll pass it back to Caitlin.
So as we've mentioned, some uncertainty right now, but that doesn't change some of the action plans that we had identified. The outreach team here at the HRA is kind of in a space right now of exploring like the right mix of our own workshops that we create and offer versus partnering with organizations that have expertise and being a funnel for those types of programs. So thinking about workshops and community partnerships. Written and printed communications, as you all know, it's a big enterprise. A small communications project can be complicated. And so just having some resources available on our website and a flyer that we can direct folks to, it was a little bit of a lift, but it also was a great learning experience for both of us to kind of know like how a project moves through different levers and departments. And we heard from one of our inspectors almost immediately that they were really happy to be able to share that flyer with a participant who asked about homeownership. And so we're happy to receive that feedback and know that our coordinators also are able to refer folks to those resources. And then in the future, thinking about digital and video communications, the HRA has always needed to communicate pretty complicated housing information. And so thinking about how we can use the resources of the enterprise for some of those digital and video communications that would be helpful for all of our programs, and in particular if we were to do an FSS or a homeownership program to have some sort of like explainer video, something like that. What did I? Okay. And then just wanted to mention, we want to continue focusing on tangible and locally controlled deliverables. The resources that we curated for our voucher holders is one example. And we're excited to be building partnerships and thinking about the resources and organizations to benefit our voucher holders. And so that could look like a one-off workshop offering of like register for this one-time workshop we're offering on a topic of interest, or a series of workshops, or referral pathways. Those are all some different things that we could explore with the rich ecosystem that we have here in the Twin Cities for wealth building. We know about how the voucher program works and how to talk about housing search and different things within the housing authority, but some other topics that we would explore with subject matter experts include some pretty basic financial literacy and budgeting, credit repair and debt management, homeownership counseling, saving for large purchases. We know that there are organizations in the Twin Cities already doing that work, and we don't want to recreate a curriculum. We want to create pathways for our participants to access those resources as we continue figuring out the business item and the action steps for the Housing Authority. And I think with that, that is the end of our prepared slides. So we're happy to take any other questions.
Great discussion on this report. Thank you. Thanks so much for your work. Discussion on this report. 1 second. Councilmember Lindstrom.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. First and foremost, I hope you're refreshing the Met Council's job board every 5 minutes. I think we'd be lucky to have you. I think you mentioned that with the FSS, something like across the nation, 15% moved on to home ownership. And I'm just curious, I don't know if we know this, how does that compare to our voucher holders as a whole? You know, over a year, 2 years, 3 years, how many move on to home ownership? Less than that, more than that, about that?
Paulson, do you have a-
Chair?
Yeah.
Council member? So that's actually something that we've been discussing internally about tracking the reasons for termination more closely. So we have really broad termination reasons. Someone can choose to voluntarily leave, someone can go over income. There's a variety of reasons. But we've been working with our communications department to be following up with more of what that looks like to say, for example, why weren't you able to place your voucher? You went over income. Where are you living now? Kind of getting some more targeted information to help us better understand what happens when you're not a participant on the program anymore.
Yeah, I think that'd be really influential for us to decide if we want to explore this. If our number is at 5% and we can get 15%, wow, that's very compelling.
Thank you. There's a gentleman here in the audience that is raising his hand, sir, if you want to come forward.
I'll tell you what, I can step up and speak up, and I don't want to move anybody over, but I was trying to help this team here, because if you go back to the slide where it says digital video and communications, I'm not going to solicit anything, but I do a television show at a cable access station, and you might want to start there. SPNN here in St. Paul, 224-5413 is all you got to call and have your plan ready. They'll take a look at it. The beauty of it is now they're starting an iPod studio. The other thing is they have a whole bunch of social media like YouTube and all those things. And one of the fastest growing, believe it or not, digital video things is YouTube. And so I'm just trying to help you. I don't have anything bad to say, and I'm dressed appropriately under this heavy winter jacket. So I followed all the rules. I did take a couple drinks of pop back there, you know. But I did. But we're here to help. So, and my name's Mark Hughes, and I executive produce Disability Viewpoints. And I didn't say that as a free plug, but I've been doing it 27 years. So if I can help you, reach out.
Thank you so
Mr.
much.
Yeah,
I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes. We appreciate the offer to help and
I just
appreciate you being here.
wanted to let you all know I really do work.
I believe you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have other discussion. I have a question as well, and you touched on how we approach this as a business item or what our path forward is. And I apologize if I missed this. Do we have some idea of what that looks like? How we go forward from here?
I'm going to defer to Ms. Paulson on that.
Yeah, Ms. Paulson.
Chair, council members. So essentially we would need to pick one, likely, if we were going to, because these are two uniquely different programs that require different, basically miniature plans that are a supplement to our administrative plan, which you all are very familiar with. So essentially we create a separate guide as to how we would operate either of these two programs. And in the research and in the resident engagements, what we found was that it probably makes sense for us to explore an FSS program first before an HCV homeownership program for a couple of reasons, but certainly we're in its infancy, so our minds could be changed, but it captures a greater audience of those who would qualify. So for families that are not interested in a homeownership option, they could use this as a way to build wealth and meet other savings goals and other wealth building goals. The second would be in the event that we started an HCV homeownership program, the Metro HRA would need to make some type of kind of policy or process as to how families would be selected into that program. And there's a variety of ways that housing authorities across the nation have done it. But one way could be if you graduate from FSS or you're a participant with the FSS program, then you could move into HCV homeownership. And so maybe I'll pause and see if Caitlin or Elizabeth want to add anything extra beyond what I said. No?
Anything?
Okay.
Great, thank you.
You're
Thanks for
welcome.
that. Further discussion, Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had the same question, so
Sure.
thank you for asking. And have kind of the same thought process too, particularly since we have so few affordable homes available pushing people into a hyper-competitive market doesn't seem very productive. You know, they might be able to get a house that somebody else might have gotten, but it's just kind of, you know, having piranhas eat each other rather than really helping where the FSS, getting people that they don't need assistance anymore. I mean, if we could give that to every single person that's in the voucher system, I would love that, because that's the whole point is, you know, get whatever you need to get together so that you don't have to be on assistance anymore. Should be our goal for as many of our participants as we can.
Thank you, thanks.
And then
Ms.
I'll
Magistad.
add that were we to have Elizabeth on our team full-time, she could help continue advance this work. It really, like, local dedicated funding, staff time matters, right? And so having staff that are knowledgeable about the resources and really needing to be knowledgeable about a vast array of resources because we cover a large geography, because people are going to be looking, so like we can't just do homeownership counseling, right? We would need to be knowledgeable about lots of resources. And so I think staff time matters, and staff time can be funded lots of different ways. But right now, like the outreach team at the HRA, we're getting ready for some other big business. Just a matter of balancing the different business items that we have, right? In terms of our regular rental assistance business, opening our waiting list, and other things like that. So this is very important, but it's also not the bread and butter of the HRA.
Great, good point. Thank you. Further discussion, Councilmember Chambliss.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm really glad to hear about the success of the FSS program and your work with the program. I think, you know, what Councilmember Wolf said about utilizing the skills learned by the Family Self-Sufficiency Program in our HRA program, or HCV program would be nice. So potentially maybe even looking at some sort of a hybrid option when we look at this again in the future.
Great, thank you. Further discussion, Councilmember Carter.
Thank you. It is really good to hear more of the detail about how these programs work. I've known they've existed, and just to hear more is really helpful. Thank you so much for working with us, and thank you for the coordination of that work that has enabled us to have this presentation today, but also to know that we're building skills in people like you who may come back to us. That is great, such as the council member said. I do want to ask about what happens now. I know that you're going to be going back and doing this additional work, you know, with the community and getting additional information. We are still looking at the possibilities and what could be next for FSS or housing choice voucher, if that may be something that people are interested in, and help us to design. I cannot help but think about the fact that beyond FSS participants, there are individuals in our community who already own homes, and but for a medical emergency or some devastating thing that happens, the loss of a job or whatever, may end up being in our pool. And I wonder if we're thinking about things like that perhaps with an HCV could be a possibility, you know, to help keep people from losing their homes. I just wanted to mention that because I don't want us to, you know, for the beauty of FSS, which is very, very wonderful and looks great, to not think creatively about how we might apply an HCV opportunity. So I just wanted to ask that question and find out what's next. Are we still noodling around that, or have we set that aside?
Thank you, Chair, Council Member. I think not currently having any funding available on the federal level, right? Like right now there is not a NOFO or a NOFA for FSS staff. And so in terms of an FSS program at the federal funding level, we don't know when that would be an option. So I think that underscores the point that Ms. Paulson made, that we can we could fund an FSS position and have some local flexibility in how that program operated, using the lessons, using the framework from HUD, but not being bound to some of the program requirements that they have, knowing what we need for our local housing market. And so I think really that expanding the relationships that we have with nonprofits here and doing some kind of like one-off offerings to be building our muscle. I say a lot that we kind of want to build our muscle here at the HRA for some of this different type of outreach than the typical rent assistance we're doing. So those are some ideas that are exciting to me as I think about the future of this work, is just building those partnerships and increasing the connectivity between the nonprofit housing world and the housing authority world, because this is my first time working in a housing authority, and I come from a field of nonprofit work, and the connectivity could always be increased. And so those are things that are top of mind for me. But if Ms. Paulson has anything else she wants to add, I'll defer to her.
Good answer. Councilmember Carter?
No, thank you.
No, thank you. Great question.
Thanks.
Any further discussion on this report? So, and I know this is kind of a version of what I asked earlier, so I apologize. And so are we thinking, and I know this relates to approval of administrative plans and things, are we thinking in a timeline, even in this uncertain resource environment? Or, I think there's a lot of interest on this committee in both of these programs. It seems like FSS is, yeah, so when do we get another bite at this apple?
Chair, council members, this is going to be an ongoing conversation. I anticipate that we'll continue to do further exploration. And Elizabeth, I would also like to publicly thank both Caitlin and Elizabeth and their manager, Ryan, who's in the audience, for their incredible work on this. This has been certainly a labor of love. They've spent an incredible amount of time speaking with the community, speaking with partners, doing some lit reviews, working with our comms department. And so this presentation comes to you in 30-minute form over several months.
Sure.
But yes, we will be back. In the event that we wanted to adopt this, we would probably put it into our annual PHA plan, and I come to you in the summertime for that. I will be back to you actually, I think, next CDC meeting to talk to you about some HOTMA and some Inspire stuff. It won't be included in those administrative plan revisions, but it's certainly something that we can continue to talk about through the summer.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate your work as well. Community members, any other comments, questions? Councilmember Carter.
Yeah, what's HOTMA? I'm sorry.
HOTMA, Chair, council members. HOTMA, Housing Opportunity Through Modernization Act. This is just a teaser for April 7th.
Thank you.
No spoilers. Thank you. Thanks again for your work. Good luck with your studies. And it sounds like you're a free agent after May, so yeah, maybe we'll see you again here. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and then we'll move on to our final information item for the evening. It's our 2025 Housing and LCA Livable Communities Act Work Plan, or Livable Communities Account Work Plan update. Before I turn it over to Ms. Berkey, I want to recognize Director Barajas for a comment or two.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair, committee members. You may remember, I believe it was in February, we've had a couple of canceled meetings here, but in February, our HRA team came to talk about work plan update for this year for that particular department. And as we're building the committee's work plan and moving from policy development, heavy policy development into implementation, we wanted to bring you more in-depth work plan updates for our different departments in our regional planning department. So Sarah will be kicking that off today with our Housing and Livable Communities group. And then you'll hear from us in the future from our local planning assistance group and from our regional parks group as well. And then we'll bring that all back into one solid committee work plan for you, probably a little bit later in April as we go through these, because we do have a lot of detail in each of these, and I want to gloss over that in our standard committee work plan discussion. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sarah.
Great. Thank you. Ms. Berkey, welcome.
Thank you, Chair Lilligren. Hello, committee members. I'm Sarah Berkey. I'm the Senior Manager for Housing and Livable Communities, and just pleased to be here sharing an overview, which many of you know, but maybe not everyone has heard in this forum, of the work our team does in general, and then what we'll bring to you all this year for information and for action. So the Housing and Livable Communities Act Work Unit includes both our housing policy work and our Livable Communities Act work. These two functions within our team are really interrelated. So we connect regional housing policy planning and development goals with local planning and development efforts in the region with our Livable Communities Act, or LCA, grant programs, which are structured as an incentive, and they're an implementation tool for cities to align their development with regional housing policy and our overall goals in our regional development guide. Our team with these two components is growing. I wanted to note that we have a position posted right now that'll be a new supervisory role focused on LCA programs, closing on Friday if you know anyone who's interested in applying. We have about 8 folks now, and we'll grow to 10 or 11 on the team by the end of this year, we think. So on the housing policy side, we are very excited to finally be in the Imagine 2050 era. As you know and have heard a lot about, the Imagine 2050 housing policy plan is really focused very heavily on partnerships and technical assistance. And so this year we are focused on preparing cities to implement all of these goals and provide guidance for them as they begin the next comprehensive planning cycle. So we received a lot of feedback after the last cycle that cities wanted more clarity, more guidance on housing policy within their comprehensive planning. And so we are planning to provide data, research, technical assistance to really reduce all the barriers that cities might face in this process and empower them to create a really strong housing element of their plans. So you will see some of this come through, and we'll share it as it's developed, but by August, we'll release a handbook as part of the overall local planning handbook in close collaboration with others in our division and across the whole council, so that cities are equipped with guidance for what does Imagine 2050 mean as they start doing their local planning work. We also expect to do a lot more with technical assistance, especially with our pro-housing grant from HUD. And we'll be able to help communities learn from each other and support innovative efforts on the local level with that additional grant funding as well. So we're very excited. Each year, another tradition of the housing policy team is to present to this committee on trends in affordable housing development. We do that jointly with the research team in community development and talk about overall residential development trends, as well as specifically affordable housing production numbers, how communities are doing and making progress toward the need that they're allocated. And we highlight key housing policy topics. So please expect more on that in the fall. And then, as I mentioned, pro-housing will really be a big boost, we hope, to our efforts that we would be already engaging in as we help work with communities to implement Imagine 2050. We have $9 million in federal funding, and that will help us to really shift the policy and development environment to meet the region's housing needs better and to lean into what's working already. One of the reasons we know that we were selected for this competitive funding is that our region is already doing really good work. And the idea with additional funding at the regional level is to make sure every corner of the region, has the ability to learn from and benefit from good work that's underway, and that we can continue to be a leader nationally in addressing housing. So we will work closely in partnership with Hennepin and Ramsey counties to launch this work. We intend to offer some direct grants to support local policy and programs in a way that will be very similar to some of the LCA policy development grants we already offer. And I will give the caveat that we are still in the very early stages of launching this work. So we will bring updates to you throughout the year as we actually launch these programs. On the LCA side, we are celebrating 30 years since the passage of the 1995 Livable Communities Act. And so we want to spend a little time this year just celebrating that and the fact that, more than $550 million in grant funds have gone out from the council to 1,400 projects in the region over those decades. As we celebrate that milestone, we're also, with Imagine 2050, ready to look at our program and make sure that we're in alignment with council policy and with regional goals. This year, as you know, last month, this committee approved the funding distribution plan, and we plan to put out $29.4 million in grants this year using criteria very similar to what you saw last year. But in addition to that, we are working to implement kind of the intersection of what we're required to do by the LCA statute, the intersection of statutory guidance, the updated regional development guide, which is updated every 10 years, and then using those two pieces of key guidance along with other direction from policymakers to develop guidelines for the grant programs, which are approved by this committee each year. So we've been in these discussions about how to update the program for many years, at least since 2022. Lots of stakeholder engagement, surveys to regular participants. We did engagement workshops with the Community Development Committee in 2023. And we did workshops with a consultant that we hired last year, engaging many of our partners in the region to give feedback on what works and what could be improved about LCA programs, so that we're really ready to incorporate all of those findings and, the 6 conversations we had with this committee last year as well with Imagine 2050 and distill that all down into a clear approach for the program and understand what kind of impact we're trying to achieve with the program, with some revisions to our guidelines and how we think about making decisions and then measuring progress on the program. So please expect throughout the year, this is your first quick quarterly update about LCA program updates, but we will bring you another update this summer. And then we're working toward really a full recommendation for what the program could look like in 2026 by the earlier part of the fall, so that we have time to get buy-in and then start to really market and do outreach to potential applicants ahead of the 2026 funding cycle. So you will expect to see some very specific and measurable goals that we think we can work with to really understand how we're making progress toward the Imagine 2050 goals and the overall goals of the LCA program. We'll be developing some options, bringing them out to do workshops with some key stakeholders again this spring, then refining based on that feedback and presenting those options again in a refined format before they are finalized. So we will, again, bring updates to this committee, and we can also invite you to sit in on some of those discussions and listen to hear, maybe perhaps not participate actively, but listen to what's going on so that you're ready to participate then at this policy making level as well. And so we can send you updates about that as those opportunities get scheduled, and just would want to make sure to be aware of who's attending and whether we have a quorum issue or not. But other than that, you're very welcome. So with that, I just wanted to say thank you and look forward to all this work ahead, and also ask you if there's anything else you would like to learn about at future meetings this year, please just let me know.
Thank you, Ms. Berkey, for the report, for your work. Thanks to the team as well. And it's a big deal, right? It's 30 years old now, the Livable Communities Act. And I'll just remind committee members, there's been a strong interest on this committee for a number of years to sort of have some revision to the Livable Communities Act guidelines, right? And I really appreciate, Ms. Berkey, you and the rest of the team sort of pacing this in a way that we're really prepared to do that. We've done some more minor changes or reforms to the guidelines, but we've really been looking for that kind of wholesale approach, and I feel like we're set up well to do that. And see the results in 2026. So good work. Discussion on Ms. Berkey's report, Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the handbook, the local planning handbook, I've heard some feedback that cities are really interested in knowing what are the absolute must-haves, the checklist. These are the things you have to have, and then these other things are things that you might want to have, or like we might like to see, and what resources are available to help you navigate that.
Cool. Yeah. Good feedback.
Yeah, I think Councilmember Wolf, that sounds exactly like what we hope to provide, real clarity about what's required and then where can you do more, and we'll provide resources for both.
Thank you.
Cool, thanks, good point. Further comments, questions, Councilmember Chambliss?
Yeah, good update on the collaboration or the connection between LCA and the housing, and an update on the full housing plans. Looking forward to the fall presentation and getting more information and having further discussion.
Thank you. Further discussion, Mr. Hughes, I saw your hand was up. Normally, we don't have members of the public
I know
address
that.
the committee.
I know, I'm sorry.
That's right.
I apologize.
Don't.
I just wanted to ask a question. I saw in your budget there was a funding for some 5 or 6.7 million for transportation. What type of transportation does that include? The reason I'm asking, because at Metromobility, which some of the folks test, right, we're experiencing curfews and budget cuts and things like that. And I've recommended that Metromobility start billboard advertising. And I've been after that for a few years to offset some of the costs. I'm just wondering what your transportation budget item would be.
Ms. Burke, do you have a response?
And I apologize.
No, it's all right. It's transit-oriented development, right, at the 5.7 mil?
And also, if you need me to help, I know you're looking for people, I could be interested at some point.
Great.
Thank you.
Ms. Burke, do you have a comment or response?
Sure, Chair Lilligren, and thank you for the question. That's the transit-oriented development program is not for transit, but for real estate projects usually around transit locations. So building housing or commercial space or other kind of physical amenities. So not exactly what you were asking about, unfortunately. Yeah. Thank you, though.
What's the term we heard? Was it transit-adjacent development, right? Is that the hip new term that we should be using? All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hughes. Further comments, questions on the report? Great, so this will be quarterly, right? That will approximately quarterly, so we look forward to further engagement.
Great.
Thank you, Ms. Berkey, and to your whole team.
All right, thank you.
I feel, Director Barajas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just add that you'll probably see either through me or Sarah, and probably in addition to the weekly updates from your CRSs around opportunities to participate in listening sessions too. So look for those in your inbox.
Thank you.
Cool.
Ms. Berkey, I'm sorry, I was going to ask you, and this is Ms. Berkey. I was just going to, out of curiosity, the final slide has this great commons area with these very contemporary sort of light. Where is that?
That is the Artery in Hopkins.
Okay, cool. Did anyone know that?
Speaking of transit-oriented.
Okay, that's Councilmember Cameron's district. It's really cool.
Really cool. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Award-winning.
Is it?
The Artery is an award-winning project on a national scale.
Nice. I can see why.
National EPA
Very cool. Thank you. Thanks. Michelle, anything for the committee?
I have nothing.
Cool. Director Barajas?
Yeah, I just have one reminder about an opportunity this week. On Thursday, our art and policy team is hosting with the Walker Art Center community conversations.
I am going.
So that's Thursday at the Walker. You can play Go Policy with our staff at 5. The panel discussion begins at 6. Chair Zelli will be giving opening remarks as well. There is I think you need to register for it, but it's free to attend. We certainly welcome you all to attend.
Thanks for that reminder. I plan on attending. Cool. Anything else? Yeah, Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have some good news. Last month, the city of Lakeville approved a 130-unit expansion to a manufactured home park, which is kind of unheard of in Minnesota for a very long time. You see them being shut down, but this one is actually being expanded. And in response to resident concerns, the city used that opportunity to leverage asking the developer to upgrade some of the infrastructure in the existing park as part of that project. So it's a big deal. That's 130 new units of manufactured housing.
Great. Thanks for sharing that good news. And what community was it? I just missed it.
Lakeville.
Lakeville, thank you. Thanks, very cool. Anyone else? Anyone else? Great. Seeing no further business before this committee, we're adjourned.